Jack from San Diego, I don't really like talking about wrestling ratings or any kind of business metrics when it comes to things I enjoy. As far as I'm concerned, the only viewer that matters is me. That said, since there's been talk about AEW ratings in 2025, I was wondering if you had seen Tony Khan's tweet posting evidence of their growth this year. Does this tweet make you rethink your own stance on the ratings? I, for one, am happy to hear the show is doing so well because it benefits everyone for any wrestling company to do well. Hey, I'm always happy to hear about a show doing well. The shows do well, I do well. Everybody wins. The shows do badly or the shows go belly up. I have one less show to review, which is bad for business. So I'm with you on that. That being said, I did see the graphic. The collision numbers that he posted in the graphic that I saw are a bit misleading, since that would include however many NBA games that served as a lead-in to because the show's been bounced around a lot this year. And several times they have used like an NBA game or some kind of event like that as a big lead-in to the show to get a lot of eyeballs on that first quarter. And it gives them a huge first quarter, but then usually there's a big drop-off immediately after that. But fair play to him because he is technically correct, so he can be happy about that. The Dynamite stuff is funny to me because we're always told how important the 18 to 49 demo number is when it comes to these shows, but in the graphic, they cited 25 to 54. That was the demo they listed. So we seem to have moved on from 18 to 49, even though that's still the key demo for advertisers. But if they've seen growth in 25 to 54, hey, growth is growth. So that's good to see. And we still don't know how many more people are watching on Max because they don't share those numbers. But those numbers don't include Max, just for the record, the numbers that he posted. So whatever those numbers are, they are higher. We just don't know how much higher they are. I'm sure it's a shit show in the comments underneath what he posted, so I didn't even bother looking. The viewership is still down, though, from what they were doing a couple of years ago, and I don't think that point should be lost. Absolutely, if there's growth, then trumpet that growth, but the viewership is still down from what they had been doing previously. And there is also a reason that they are running much smaller buildings for weekly television. They may still be running big buildings for pay-per-views, but they're not doing that week to week like they used to. If they can build on this growth, maybe one day they can get back to the place that they were in before. They're not running smaller venues because Tony Khan loves running smaller venues. They're running smaller venues because they weren't able to fill the bigger venues, and they really had no choice. It's much better running the smaller venues in this case because that way you don't have a half-empty building, and plus the acoustics are so much better if you have a lively crowd. I love some of these venues that they've run. That music hall, was it in Boston? I think it was. Some of these smaller venues, and I think there was one maybe in Ohio, where the crowd is really hot. And so even though it's a smaller building, it just aesthetically it looks kind of cool and it sounds great on TV. That's all well and good, but don't ever lose sight of the fact that the only reason they are running these buildings in the first place is because they could not sell enough tickets in the NBA buildings that they were running. So again, if there is growth to be seen in this demo or that demo or on Max or whatever, then that needs to be built on. Now, you can talk about the quality of the shows, and there are some people who think the shows right now are better than they have ever been. But if that's the case, then it would be reflected in attendance, and that's not happened yet. So if you think that AEW Dynamite is better than ever, then that should be reflected very soon in the attendance numbers for these shows, especially at a time when you would have to sell your own kidney to buy tickets to a WWE show. WWE is pricing people out of going to shows. AEW has an advantage over WWE in that their shows are priced more affordably. That's something I would lean into more. But if the shows are more affordable and the shows are so great, then you would think 6 months from now they would be running bigger buildings again. I don't know that I see that happening. But if all of that is true, then it should. It's just something to watch for in the second half of 2025. Jim from Pennsylvania. With the announcement of Survivor Series at Petco Park, I am sick and tired of the annual War Games match. I've never been a fan of the match's use in WWE in general. The lack of blood and open cage for high spot purposes has turned a match that used to be one of the most intense in all of wrestling into yet another safe and predictable match that is more focused on creating highlights and hype moments. The number of injuries that we have seen in the big match in the last few years is also not ideal. I believe War Games is dangerously approaching Hell in a Cell pay-per-view territory, where the company is force booking the match instead of saving it for a storyline that truly deserves it. I believe that WWE should be, at the very least, bringing back some traditional Survivor Series tag matches and potentially give War Games a 1 or 2 year break to make it feel more special in the future. What say you? I think you said that perfectly. Yeah, I was very happy when they brought War Games to the main roster and at Survivor Series, because literally that was something I was arguing for as far back as 2010 on this show. So when they did it, I was very happy. Triple H obviously brought it back in NXT. He always wanted to do it. Vince wanted nothing to do with it. But just the idea that you got these 2 rings set up side by side, you got these 10 men or women, now they do the women's ones, and they're just, beating the hell out of each other, and it's mass chaos. It's a fun match, but I agree with you in that it should only be saved for when you really have a feud worthy of a War Games match. And I think that maintaining even just once a year at Survivor Series, a traditional 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 elimination match, is something that they should be doing even on a card with War Games. You could still have one traditional Survivor Series match. I don't know why they just completely junked the entire format. So I'm with you. If there is a story to support a War Games match, then by all means do War Games. I think part of the problem is that they put the promotional materials out so far in advance, and they don't always have their plans creatively booked out that far in advance. So they already have advertisements out for the show promoting War Games because they think, the idea of War Games is in and of itself a draw. And I think that's part of the problem. They want to settle on a theme for the show months and months in advance when they may not have their creative plans fully fleshed out for the show. But I do think giving it a break every now and then is a good thing. I'm not saying revert back to the Survivor Series format where it's just nothing but elimination matches. But even on these shows with War Games, I would like to see them at least keep one traditional Survivor Series match. Tal from Israel. Where does the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, belong on the list of who's who of wrestling managers? Good question. He's pretty damn high on that list. Jimmy is one of the GOATs of wrestling managers, going back to his Memphis days and the stuff that he did with Jerry Lawler. He even got to work a program with Andy Kaufman, like Lawler did. He had his greatest success in WWE, managed a ton of big names, but he also worked for WCW for many years. And you know what? Beyond his on-camera stuff, he was a very important figure when it came to entrance music in both companies. Because of his background as a musician, he was part of a band called the Gentrys, back in the 60s. And they were very successful. So he's had a musical background going back to his younger days. And we talk a lot about the importance of entrance music, especially at a time now when entrance music, at least in WWE, is pretty fucking bad. It just goes to illustrate how important it is when you listen back to, days gone by in these different promotions and how catchy, a lot of the entrance themes and how identifiable many of the entrance themes were. Jimmy had a lot to do with that. So for all the great songs Jim Johnston is credited for, Jimmy probably doesn't get enough credit. Jimmy was responsible for Shawn Michaels' entrance music, both the version that had Sherry singing and then the version that had Shawn himself singing. He was responsible for Demolition's theme, the Honky Tonk Man, the $1 Million Man, the Fabulous Rougeaus, some of those early instrumental themes for WrestleMania and SummerSlam. That was Jimmy Hart. So was the NWO Wolfpack theme. He wrote that one too, or he co-wrote it at least. And they got C Murder to record it. So he's every bit as influential, in that way as he was as a manager. I rank Jimmy very high. He's not top 3 for me. That would be Heenan, Heyman, and Cornette. They have those spots locked up, but he's definitely in my top 5. Those last 2 spots are between him and Sensational Sherry. Paul Bearer is like right below that. So put him in number 4, put him in number 5. Either way, he's top 5 in my book. David from Chicago, I was listening to Jim Cornette's podcast and a question was asked about Paul Heyman getting the book once Eric Bischoff was sent home from WCW. Do you think Heyman would have made a better impact on WCW creative, or would things have ended the same way? You know, it's actually, I feel like it's two completely different questions here, because would he have had a better impact on WCW creative? Absolutely. Did you watch WCW in the dying days? Like, I think, honestly, I mean, I saw a possum in the street a few weeks ago here in Brooklyn. Yes, we have Brooklyn possums. And I think the possum would have done a better job than whoever the hell was doing. I mean, the creative was handled by so many different people at that point. I can't even just say it was Russo, Bischoff, who the hell knows? The possum would have done a better job. So would Paul Heyman have done a better job creatively? That was his strong suit. Creatively was his strong suit. The business end of things, not so much. But you're talking about two different things. So creative would have improved under Heyman. Would things have ended pretty much the same way for WCW? I think they would have, because I think they were just so far gone. They were too far gone at that point. They were too far gone, and also Turner was looking to just unload and just be done with it at that point. The glory days were over. They weren't getting them back. WWF was so much stronger than they were when WCW was kicking their ass. There were just too many things working against them. So I think creatively the actual television product might have improved, but I don't think it would have really changed the outcome. I think we would have ended up in the same place. Now, he also has a completely unrelated buy or sell on movies. Which decade had the better movies? 1980s or 1990s? I mean, it's so subjective. I love 80s and 90s movies. I just think they're the best. The 80s gave us so many things. The 80s gave us Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Die Hard, RoboCop, Terminator, Top Gun, Lethal Weapon, E.T., Beetlejuice, Batman, Scarface, Beverly Hills Cop, just a shit ton of John Candy movies. I miss that guy. Oh God, there's so many I'm missing. And that's to say nothing of all the horror franchises that started in the 80s, right? Friday the 13th, which I have a question on that, actually coming up here in a second. Nightmare on Elm Street, The Thing, Creepshow, Child's Play, The Fly, Fright Night, They Live. It was the era of practical effects. Rob Bottin is still the best when it comes to that stuff. The 80s were great. 80s wrestling was the best too. The hair, maybe not so much. But then you look at the movies we got in the 90s, and I mean, it's not like there isn't a lot of great stuff there. I mean, you got Terminator 2, one of the all-time great sequels, right? People talk about Godfather 2, but you can't leave Terminator 2 out of that conversation either. Goodfellas, Casino, Heat, The Shawshank Redemption, which is one of the greatest movies ever made, Saving Private Ryan, Toy Story, Jurassic Park, the original, not all of the inferior sequels that we've gotten, Schindler's List, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, Silence of the Lambs, Scream. I mean, the 80s was definitely the better horror decade. I give it the edge on movies overall, but it's all a matter of your personal taste and what you look for in your movies. I mean, some people love horror, some people like action, some don't. Some like more artsy films and less big budget blockbusters, which we got a lot of in the 80s. I think you'll find what you like in either one, but to me, the 80s is still tops. But, then you have people that are a little bit older who would probably swear by the 70s. Look at what we got in the 70s. You got The Godfather Part 2, Jaws, which just celebrated 50 years. Alien, Rocky, The Exorcist, Taxi Driver, Star Wars. All goes back to the 70s.